Okay.
Hello, welcome to the Curriculum Committee meeting, Tuesday, February 13th. We are virtual today via Zoom because of a district snow day. Dr. Babson will not, our committee chair, will not be joining us. He has an excused absence, so I, as vice chair, will be running the meeting. Let's start it off with introductions and administrative remarks. Thank you.
Good evening, board members and community. It's really ironic that the last two meetings, when we haven't had snow days or remote committee meetings of any kind for 2 years, our back-to-back meetings happen to be both snow days and remote committee meetings. So especially coincidental. But here we are nonetheless. I don't have any administrative remarks today. We do have a pretty full agenda. We're going to be speaking about our comprehensive plan for the next 3 years. Math placement criteria, and then some adjustments and updates to our district instructional calendar. Other than that, I'm ready to move forward. I do not believe that we have any public comment.
Okay, so we'll move to the review of minutes. Committee members, did you have a chance to review the minutes and everything look okay? Thank you. Then let's go right into our agenda items. First on the agenda, 4.01, approval and ratification of student trips.
We do have one student trip from the high school for the board to approve. It did happen just a week ago or so. I don't know if there's any questions about the trip itself.
I think we did have a question of the district contribution. What would the trip was involved? And I know there was some discussion earlier in our pre-meeting, so if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, it was the one contribution had to do with the district providing 2 vans for transportation. That was the one component to it. It was a relatively short trip to Maryland, and that was the one contribution. I believe at the time it was a quick turnaround, and securing full buses wasn't necessary. It was a smaller group of individuals.
And so this actually wasn't a cash contribution, right? It was for gas and for, district vehicle wear and tear that we do from an accounting standpoint, correct?
That is correct. Exactly as you described.
Great. Any questions? Okay, let's move on to 402, approval of the new IDS format to support the implementation of the STEEL standards.
Okay, so this should sound familiar. We had a presentation, I believe it was in October, and then again last month. The difference between the two was really a formal recommendation to the board in January that would go to the regular business meeting next week. And the action item is here for the board today, again, just as a reiteration, and the presentation is attached in board docs as well. And that is to look at approving the addition of twice a cycle for our K-5 students to attend Innovation Design Studio, which will be a reimagination of what we currently offer to students, and will incorporate the new Pennsylvania science standards known as the STEELs. And it would be an integrated approach to implementing these standards and delivering those to our students, offering our teachers an opportunity to specialize in the science and the STEELs design, the pedagogical design, as well as offer some additional benefits, including additional instructional time for our K-5 teachers that could be allocated toward English language arts and mathematics instruction. So we feel like this was a great bonus to how we can implement these standards in a really high quality way. And I think we shared through all the rationale last meeting. So wanted to open it up for any final questions there, and that would be an action item next Tuesday night for the full board to approve.
Any questions?
No questions. I just have a comment. I just want to reiterate how wonderful it is that we were able to almost anticipate these new standards, and how how great it is that we already have IDS and we can just kind of expand on that structure rather than it being a kind of wholesale reimagining of our curriculum in order to meet the new standards. Actually, I do have a question. In terms of the 3 new hires, what kind of profile are we anticipating that we're looking for in terms of the people that we would be bringing in to teach these new standards?
Yeah, great question. And one thing I'll mention is, with approval from the board next week, we will have approximately 18 months to prepare for that. So even those additions, they're not represented in this year's budget that the board would potentially approve. It's really a next year's budget. And that gives us time to find ways to try to minimize that budget impact as much as we can. As far as looking for outside folks or internal folks who may be interested in teaching this class, we'll be looking for individuals who have, a high passion and competency for STEM and computer science standards that want to work in this type of model. And so there are a lot of elementary folks internally and externally who might be very enticed by this type of position, which offers an opportunity for us to integrate science, engineering and design, our current IDS model, and bringing it to our students in a twice a cycle approach, which gives them an opportunity to specialize and work really closely with students, more so than we've had in the past with IDS, and I think deliver a really high quality product.
Okay, Sean's
Frozen.
frozen. Well, I'll jump in. I just like to echo Ms. Lau's comments, and then also just say that, from everything we heard, I think it was discussed last meeting, just this is a really win-win, and that the teachers are really excited about this new structure and the potential it has, both, even for other parts of the curriculum to spend more time on them and have more time in the classroom, which our understanding is hard to find in the elementary level. So it's great. And I'd also like to welcome Ella. Thank you, Ella, for joining us on a snow day. We appreciate it. So I think Dr. Dukevich is probably trying to log back in to see if he can.
He is. He will be back on momentarily.
Terrific. I see Ms. Gorton has a comment or a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick question while we're waiting for Dr. Dukevich to get back on. Has there been formally or informally some feedback from the teachers about the hybrid model? How much of this has been shared with faculty and teachers? I think it's fantastic. I was just curious if there was, has this been actually rolled out at all to them for some feedback? You mentioned, Mrs. Duffy, that they're excited, but I was wondering if there was something formalized.
Yeah, before we brought this to the committee this year, we did bring together representatives from the science vertical team as well as IDS teachers to talk with them about the idea and get some initial feedback. They weren't necessarily speaking for all teachers, but they were giving us a little sense, at least, of what they were thinking as teachers, and it was very positive from them. What we've heard from their additional feedback after going back to their schools and at least sharing it to some degree with those teachers they've spoken about has continued to be positive. So I think Dr. Hand can probably chime in here as well, because he's been talking with teachers also. The feedback we've gotten is very positive. They like the idea of being able to focus and have a little bit more time for math and ELA instruction, as well as the opportunity to have a little bit more planning time if it allows for that. In addition, I think, as you're well aware, with the implementation of a new math program this year, in anticipation of implementing a new ELA program, not next year, but the year after that, it sort of gives a little bit of time to digest and work through those changes without also having to not only become, experts with the new STEEL standards, but possibly learn a new science program in between. So I think, by and large, the feedback we've heard from teachers has been very positive. It also looks like Dr. Dukevich is back on, so he may have something to add.
Clearly, I need an IDS teacher in the house here. My computer just decided to reboot without any notice. But thankfully, Dr. Kearney and I and Dr. Hand and others have worked very closely on this initiative. So it was easy for him or Dr. Hand even to step right in. So I missed that part. So I'm sorry if any questions are still remaining. I'm happy to help answer them as well.
I think we're good. Ella? Anything? Okay. I think we can move on to 403, presentation of the comprehensive plan.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask Dr. Hand to screen share and bring up that presentation.
And Sean, Dr. Dukevich, for background knowledge, could you just give us a little bit? I know there's new members of the committee. Why this is up and why we're
on
the agenda right now.
Absolutely. So every 3 years, the Pennsylvania Department of Ed requires each district to submit a comprehensive plan. In the past, it used to, I'll give a little context coming up soon, but it used to be a 5 and 6 year process. It's now 3. And funny enough, we had just submitted and had approved and PDE accepted our comprehensive plan 2 years ago. It was actually submitted in January of 2022. The reason for that was it was extended the window due to COVID. However, PDE did not realign their timelines for the school districts that fell in that window of time. And for that reason, we are resubmitting an updated version of that comprehensive plan to the Board Curriculum Committee today, and then for approval in March after we go through a process, which you'll see a little bit in the presentation. But long story short, we had just submitted our plan 2 years ago. Many of those elements that were in the plan, but prior were very fresh, relevant, and part of the implementation process for a number of district initiatives. So if anyone were to compare between the two, there are a lot of similarities because, again, the plan itself was so recent. But here we are again. We're just following requirements and timelines from the state. And this plan does reflect some feedback and also some updates that were relevant to new laws, new mandates, and just things that we have gleaned as a school district. So I'm going to ask Dr. Hand to move along, and hopefully some of this clarity will come about through the next few slides. So for this presentation, we're going to address the things that are listed here on the screen, just talk briefly about the process from the state, the timelines and requirements, how we connect our comprehensive plan to our district initiatives, and how those are represented. And then the plan itself, I'm going to highlight the 3 main goals, and then beneath those goals, what are the subcategories that help to illustrate the full picture of those pieces that help to make up the comprehensive plan. And then additional to that, quickly, there's a number of state-required reports. They are on board docs now. They will be actually published to our webpage as part of the comprehensive plan for public view. And they are more just they're affirmations and assurances that we are following state law, state mandate, school code, and other things that are recent results of legislation. And so we'll talk about those things, but they get into the granular components, and I didn't know how far we wanted to go deeply into those. And again, most of the reports are really meant to for us to affirm that we're doing all the things that the state has asked us to do with fidelity, and that we have evidence to suggest that we are doing all those things well. So as I shared, not to read this to you, but this is essentially a quick illustration of the comprehensive plan process. It includes all these components. Some of them take a long time, some of them take less time. Some of them are very much an ongoing piece that we do regardless of the comprehensive plan, okay? So moving along to the next slide. These are, as I shared just a minute ago, a description of those state required reports. Some have a 3-year requirement, others a 6-year requirement. One thing to note here, the special education plan, that's the 4th highlighted paragraph, that actually is submitted by our Director of Student Services and that department on an off year. So they just submitted that report and that plan last year. So they're kind of intermittent between the process that we're involved with comprehensive plan. So that's not reflected in this piece, but it actually was presented and adopted last year. These other plans we'll talk about. So this is just a brief rundown of the comprehensive planning process that we took for this one. Again, recognizing that our previous plan was just submitted 2 years ago. We did facilitate a stakeholder feedback session in December. So we had a number of parents who came out to that, and it was wide open to the community for anyone who was interested. And then we engaged with a number of our different groups of teachers. One was with our professional development task force group, which is a pretty large group of around 20 individuals that make up all the different buildings, all the different levels, different roles that they play in the district. And in those 2 cases, we shared with them our previous comprehensive plan, our district initiatives. We asked them for feedback, what was still relevant and still important, what are areas that we might be missing and need to improve upon or expand. We collected that feedback, and that helped to develop our draft of the comprehensive plan. And a lot of different people have had a piece in that, Dr. Kearney and myself primarily, but PT Kevkis, who oversees gifted education, had a piece of this as well, and then other administrators who reviewed the plan and gave feedback to it. Which brings us to today, which is the presentation of the comprehensive plan to the board curriculum committee. And then from here, we will post the comprehensive plan and those 5 additional state required reports on our webpage for public review. That's a requirement. And 28 days is the minimum. And so we'll post that from essentially later this week or early next week for the 28 days that follow. We will collect feedback through a form and opportunities for folks to reach out to me. And then any changes or additions or adjustments will be communicated back to the board, if any. And then we will present the comprehensive plan for approval at the March regular business meeting. Following that meeting and any final feedback that will be necessary, those changes will be made. And then the plan is actually due to be submitted to the Pennsylvania Department of Education on March 31st or sooner. I will say that leading up to even this meeting, we have been engaged with our federal program coordinators at the state level who oversee and approve all of these reports. They have already gone through our draft versions of all these, provided feedback to us. We've made adjustments in those to make sure that we're meeting all the requirements that they expect to see. And at this point, we feel very confident that if submitted to the state at this point, that those reports and the comp plan itself would pass. So moving along, and I'll be brief because you've seen our district initiatives quite a bit over the last year, but I wanted to make note that our comprehensive plan is meant to be aligned with our district initiatives and vice versa. So as we move into next year and the year after, as the comprehensive plan spans 3 years, we're going to be sure that our district initiatives also reflect what we have thought to be the most important elements of our comprehensive plan. So you'll notice as I share our comprehensive plan large main goals, and again, some of those ancillary state reports, that we have elements of belonging, we have elements of student wellness and counseling, and also, of course, we have elements of student achievement and growth. So you'll notice that those areas are interwoven in the comprehensive plan. So Dr. Hannon, you can move ahead 2 slides. There we go, which again, that just reflects those other 2 initiatives. That brings us to the next 3 slides. And these next 3 slides, again, reflect our main 3 areas that you'll see in the larger comprehensive plan. The first is a continuation, really, and that is our implementation of multi-tiered systems of support. This is the outcome category is related to continuous improvement in this area. And as far as 2 goals, one has to do with the structure and overall function of MTSS in our buildings. We want to make sure that we're using the best benchmark assessments we can, that we have the best resources and tools available, that we are engaging with our data platforms to ensure that our interventions are aligned well with what students need, and essentially just the entire process of MTSS. We want to continuously work to make sure that it's the best version of itself. Second to that has to do with social emotional learning, which of course is part of the MTSS framework. We want to make sure that, again, that we are employing preventative and responsive social emotional supports and services for our students. And so those are the 2 main goals there. And then you'll notice within those goals, we have some target outcomes. So we're going to be, looking to further develop, improve, refine, wherever necessary, our MTSS structure. And then, of course, to facilitate, engage, and refine our Tier 1 through 3 programs and services for student wellness and social emotional learning to make sure students have their needs that they need met. And then through all these things, of course, these are going to have implications for professional development of our teachers and staff. So we actually have a secondary report you'll notice later in this presentation that has to directly do with professional development. And we have articulated plans, action steps, associated personnel who are direct leads for those things, and then how we plan to ensure that those things are taking place and that we're making good progress. So that's the first goal. The next 2 have to do more with the academic achievement and growth of our students. The first is focused on English language arts. And again, the outcome category really here is ensuring that our resources are strategic and equitably distributed, that we're looking closely at our student achievement data, and that we're trying to increase, of course, the achievement that's represented mainly on the PA Future Ready Index, but we get these data points through several different means. And ensuring that we have the right amount of supports affiliated with students who have the greatest needs, and that we can close that achievement gap, especially with those student subgroups who are historically underperforming. Second to this, we want to make sure that we're continuing to build our capacity, our professional capacity, instructional practices, alongside research and what are the needs of our staff, and to ensure that whatever resources we're providing them, that they're aligned with best practice. So as part of that, our target outcomes including professional development within our MTSS process regarding how we instruct reading with our students, making sure those two things are aligned, and that when we do ELA MTSS, that we have the right amount of resources aligned for our teachers so that they can meet the needs of their students. Second to this, and you'll find, again, this in ancillary documents coming up for professional development, and that's a focus on structured literacy and the science of reading. As you probably heard, if not already through Core Curriculum Committee, structured literacy and the science of reading is now a requirement by the state. However, we were already working on implementing and developing capacity of structured literacy prior to that requirement. And this year, especially, we've been really focused on using our literacy team with some regional expertise to develop our internal capacity that we can turn around training for our teachers. In fact, we'll actually be doing some structured literacy professional development this coming Friday with a good amount of our staff. So just like before, the professional development is going to be aligned to these goal statements and target outcomes. Finally, mathematics growth and achievement, again, similar to the ELA, we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all learners, but those most notably historically underperforming. So again, we're going to use best practices in teaching mathematics. We're going to be ensuring that our students with those needs have the affiliated interventions in place and resources in place, and ensure that we're meeting the needs of all students, those who require enrichment and those who require remediation at the other end. And just as I shared before, our target outcomes in professional development will be aligned with our goals here to make sure we're moving forward in the right direction. Okay, so as I shared early on, I've done a lot of talking, so I apologize, but I'll stop and open it up in a minute. The other reports that you'll find in board docs, and again, that will be publicly available for view, include academic standards requirements. And again, these are just affirmations and assurances that the state, that we are, with fidelity and integrity, implementing the academic Pennsylvania standards, that we have written curriculum affiliated with those standards, and that depending on where they fall and what grade level, that we are delivering those standards with fidelity. We also have an induction plan that's part of the comprehensive plan state required report. This delineates now how we're delivering support, mentorship, professional development with all of our new teachers who come on board. A recent change, induction used to last 1 year, it is now a 2-year process. So now that we've been able to expand that a little bit, look at what makes sense for the first year, how do we take that forward into the second year to make sure that our novice teachers who are coming on board at Radnor feel that they're supported and prepared to deliver high quality instruction. A third report is the professional development plan. I referenced that previous. So all of our comprehensive plan elements that relate to needing to provide in-service training and professional development, they have affiliated plans that outline essentially how it's going to take place over time. We've delineated over 3 years the full plan because these will not be one and done professional developments. And then different formats of delivering professional development. It could be an in-service day. It could be a workshop. It could be part of a professional learning community piece at each building level. It could be coaching. These are all elements that help to fold in a well-balanced approach to delivering professional development that has a lasting impact on student achievement. And then finally, the gifted education and student services. Again, these are affirmations and assurances of our processes that go into ensuring that we have child find systems in place to make sure that we are identifying students that have needs and that we have the appropriate accommodations, goals, and special design instruction aligned with those needs for those individuals. So moving forward, finally, I'll open it up to questions. We can certainly stop the screen share now in case there's any documents anybody wants to discuss. And I'm going to say I'm sorry, that was a lot of talking, but hopefully you'll see that we've put a lot of thought into this. We've elicited a lot of feedback from stakeholders, and a lot of that communication has really fed into where we are now with our plan. And Dr. Kearney's had a big hand in this, so I'm appreciative that he's here. He can also help to speak to any of these any questions you might have.
Well, thank you. I know this is a lot of work, especially coming so quickly again on the requirement cycle to the state. So does anyone have any questions? Ms. Lau.
Thank you. So as a new committee and board member, I was just curious as to the state mandated process that you described at the beginning of your presentation. So once our plans are submitted, does the state have a mechanism by which they actually follow up with us? Maybe toward the end, of the 3-year period to make sure that we've actually done what we planned to do? Like, is there an evaluation process? I know we as a district have our own process, right, related to our own initiatives, because, ultimately plans are just plans. If no one, makes sure that we actually carry them out, then what good are they, right? So I'm just curious if this, I know we do have mechanisms in place, but does the state actually care enough to come back and see whether we did what we told them we were going to do?
It's a great question. It's a big question. And what I would probably say, the best answer I'd have for that would be, there are mechanisms in place. Certainly there are audits by the state, and each district is in a different phase of where their comp plan is completed, when it's submitted, and how it's evaluated. We are phase 2 at Radnor. And things have gotten a little bit interesting since COVID. There was more of an audit phase process, and then there was a lot of change. And where we're at now, I don't know that I have a definitive answer for you. There's mechanisms in there where we have to substantiate that we do these things, that there's evidence to prove that we do those things, that if we were audited, we could speak to, we could bring out, we could have artifacts to ensure that all those things that we say we're going to do, we're doing. But we have not been audited in the comp plan, at least in the 4+ years I've been at Radnor. I don't know, Dr. Kieran, if you have anything to shed on that, but a lot of it is affirmations. And one thing I will say, if this does help, we have to sign our names to this as lead components of the school district. And Dr. Basher ultimately has to sign off on this, which is putting his name to a plan. So it is a little bit more of the integrity and fidelity of the individuals. But we have not been audited since the time I've been here. Some other districts perhaps have. I don't know, Dr. Kearney, if you had anything to add to that.
No, that's also my sense of things. By and large, it's an opportunity for school districts to go through a self-evaluation and provide assurances that they're doing what it is that the code is requiring them to do. Some areas might be more likely to get an audit than others. Certainly, special ed goes through a more formal process than most of the other areas. But by and large, it's an annual, or pardon me, triannual, 3 times every 3 years. School districts go through it themselves as a chance to self-assess and make assurances internally. By and large, I don't think the state necessarily comes back and looks, but they may, or they could, presumably if there was a good reason to.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. I guess my other comment would be, and obviously I can do the homework myself and go back and look, but I guess I would like to know, if we, over time find ourselves kind of addressing and tackling the same things in successive plans, like I think that would be a red flag, right? If we're constantly kind of rephrasing or retackling the same issues, like for me, I would want to know if those kinds of trends arise. So I don't know if you know offhand, whether, and I know this is an unusual situation since we only submitted the previous plan, just a couple of years ago. But, especially if we were, adhering to the full 3-year cycle, if we find that we're constantly still having to address the same issues or feel like, the same areas of concern or, areas where we need more work or are seeking more progress, like as a board member, I guess I would like to be alerted if it does seem like, we're kind of, cycling through the same issues again and again.
Yeah, that would be a red flag, no question. I will say one difference between the comp plan we submitted in 2022 in January to this one, we have some explicit mention of belonging, which is a district initiative here. We feel like there's a huge impact there on achievement, wellness, and other things. That did not exist in the first one. A little bit more on social emotional learning in this one than was 2 years ago, and an explicit focus on ELA and math as two outcome categories, which you would think, well, wouldn't you have that in the first one? But the first one was really meant to, in the initial implementation of MTSS. And now that we're in year 3, we're recognizing, okay, we've got some really good things in place, but it's also, there's never a finish line here. There's going to be a natural evolution and a continuous improvement process that'll help us make it as best that it can be. So that's why I see that continuing. To your question, Ms. Lau, if we were to move ahead 3 years and we're talking about the 28 to 31 plan, if MTSS is still in there as a implementation component, I think that would be curious. So usually the implementation of MTSS, most will tell you, is at minimum a 3-year process, and typically more somewhere close to 7 or 8 years, because there's so many elements until you get to the point where it's a really, it's a fine old machine and it's working as it should. So that's what I would say the difference in 2 years ago. We've gotten a little bit more finite. We've identified some areas that we think do require more focus. It is a little more aligned with our district initiatives than 2 years ago.
Is he going silent to everyone else again? No? Why can't I hear him? Sorry.
Still hear me? Oh, okay. We're really getting tested the last two meetings, huh? It's going to be easier when we're in person again. So I hope that answered your question, but yeah, naturally you want to see an evolution and an identification of key areas that can be improved upon.
Yeah, no, that definitely answers my question. And I recognize that there's probably a finite universe of things that could go into a comprehensive plan for a public school district. That being said, I just want to make sure that we, personally have feelers up, right? So that we don't let ourselves get away with, oh, well, we said we were going to work on it, the past 3 years. We didn't quite get there. Let's just put it back on again and we'll just keep working on it. Like, I want to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable. And especially if the state doesn't necessarily audit, vigorously, that we have, processes by which we can make sure that, we are doing what we said we're going to do.
Ms. Luck, can I just make a comment here? We also, as a district, have in place, every year we set district goals and initiatives and a plan to meet those. So we kind of, by very nature of that, we are constantly, identifying goals and initiatives and then evaluating them and moving on each year. So I think you'll find through your service that we have another layer here. So we're not just submitting something to the state. We actually have another mechanism for us to make sure that we are being true and identifying things kind of early, not waiting, right? Not waiting years to realize that we have a problem. So it's just one other level that we have to kind of keep ourselves in check.
Right.
I just had any other questions? I just had a question, and it's not really pertaining per se to what we have to report to the state, but when I see MTSS and I see outcomes and maybe the way you reported, my understanding of it is that, by the very nature of MTSS and its implementation, we're getting more granular information on each student, right? We're meeting each student. And I've always thought that then would probably result in basically reporting out to parents maybe differently. And my question is, has it already happened, or do you see in the future potentially even the way we say we do progress reports, report cards, changing by the very nature of the information we have? Is that, I think very early on we talked about it briefly, but it just struck me when I saw outcomes and reporting out, and I think that would also probably involve professional development in terms of how the teachers report out information.
It's a great question. We've actually battled with this a little bit in the sense that how much information do we want to share as a way of informing parents without raising flags for no reason. I'm trying to find a good way to articulate this. We use a lot of data points to help determine interventions, where students are, what needs they may have. Sometimes when something is sent home to a parent, it seems like a finite thing. It's summative. And then they make generalizations about that, where the process in MTSS is so fluid that we're looking at data all the time. And, we were battling with, what do we share? Is it too much? Is it too little? How do we give access to it? How do parents ask questions about it? And ultimately, where we've landed now, and I'm not saying this won't evolve in the future, is, especially in elementary, there's a pretty nice dynamic with the parent-teacher conference process. And that we've tried to channel that data review through teachers so they can speak about, here's where your child is now, here's where we want to get them, or look at the growth that they're making. This is great stuff. They can provide real practical information around those assessments, where I know some districts will open a portal or they'll send home a paper copy of different assessments that are used. But oftentimes it may elicit more questions from parents, like, oh no, is this good? Is this bad? What should I expect? I want to talk to the teacher now. Where I think our process continues to evolve, where we're using data so often in these rotational pieces that I don't know that's going to serve the purpose that some people might want it to serve at this point. I don't know if I'm going too far into the weeds here, but we battled with this idea on how much to share, when to share. And also, there's so many different assessments that we use that drive instruction, but they're not summative. So we don't want people to draw too heavy of conclusions around those things, if that makes sense.
But you're identifying trends, and then you would have the maybe bring it to an attention when it reaches a level that you've identified something that is of need of significant intervention. And that, what I'm hearing is that you think that's still well suited in the current structure that we have in place, particularly at the elementary school level, since we do 2 sets of conferences. And they're timed in a way, to get enough information in November, and then we circle back in March, so that you still have enough time to react by the end of the school year.
I do. Elementary is a little different because, as in the secondary world, their grades are posted. They have access. Parents have access to those more regularly. Where in elementary, it's a standards-based progress report. So we're sharing progress towards mastery of standards. There's not a percentage grade. There's not a GPA. It is a little different. I think that where we are now, we're probably we're still determining if this is the best way of sharing assessment data with parents, without it looking like, gosh, we're giving a lot of assessments, or we're giving too little. Like, what is the just right amount? And that's part of the implementation of MTSS, is we're trying things, we're figuring it out, we're getting feedback from our teachers, we're looking at how our students are responding, and then we're adjusting as we go. Dr. Kearney has been part of this process from the beginning. I don't know, Jim, if you have anything to add.
I think one thing I would add, just to what Ms. Duffy was saying, is that certainly if there's an identified need, particularly the elementary level, for a child who needs tier 2 or tier 3 support, the parents are notified about that. So they'll get a letter to inform them. In some cases, there'll be conferences around it as well. And that's part of the practices that go along with MTSS. We don't share all the diagnostic assessment data that's being collected, as Dr. Dukevich said. We collect a lot of it, several times a year formally, and more frequently for certain students. But if there's reason to communicate progress, or even lack of progress, if that's the case with parents, that certainly does take place.
Okay, thanks. I just remember, the integrated programs in our middle school, often some students' families don't want to do those because they say, oh, there's no grade, I'm not going to know how my child's doing. And my own personal experience, having gone through Crossroads in 6th grade, was the way that we evaluated that rubric was actually the most information I had ever gotten on my child, and the most informative and instructive moving forward. It was so much greater than a grade. And that it was such a positive experience, because I think there was such more richness and contextualization of her experience. So I kind of thought, oh, it's a shame that we don't do that more often for every student, because it really was so informative and deep. So, all right. We can move on to 404 math placement curriculum criteria.
So I'm going to ask Dr. Hand to bring up that document again and turn it over to Dr. Kearney.
All right, thank you. So what you have in front of you there is an updated version of our math placement criteria. The purpose of this criteria is to help place students into those math courses where they're going to be most appropriately challenged and supported. And this year, we're using new unit assessments with our new K-8 math program, as well as now using the STAR math assessment, grades 1 through 8. So we knew that we were going to want to take a look at our criteria and see if there were any revisions that we wanted to make this year, considering that the assessment data that we've been using in previous years has changed to some degree. So we took several steps to review the math placement criteria. In November, after the first STAR administration, grade 5 through 8 math teacher representatives and administrators met to review student STAR data by course to get a sense of the profile of the students who were in each level of our math course, as well as ask those teachers to look over their unit assessment data to have a sense of their students' performance at that point in the course. The group gave preliminary consideration to which math course would likely be the most appropriate placement for the students as they knew them as learners. And at that point, and based on that discussion, we drafted some placement criteria as a starting point. In January, after our second STAR administration, we applied that draft criteria to existing students in their math courses and asked teachers to give us some feedback about how well it worked at that point in the year. Were there students who the criteria seemed to have missed at that point that didn't qualify, who they felt maybe should be qualified for, say, an honors level math course? Were there students who had met the criteria at that point of the year who they felt maybe might have been misplaced in a higher level math course and vice versa? And gathered some of that feedback and brought together some more teacher representatives, administrators to have some conversation about this, talk about what they saw at that point in the year. We revised the draft criteria based on those discussions, and then got some additional feedback, made a few more adjustments, and what we have is the criteria that's in front of you now. So I'll take a little bit of time to walk through it, to point some areas where there haven't been changes, some areas where there have. For grades 4 to 5 and 5 to 6, in general, the feedback was that the math placement criteria seemed to work well for identifying those rising 5th grade students who might be well served in course 1 in 5th grade, and for those rising 6th grade students who might be well served by either the honors level or the seminar level. In those grades, in 4th grade, current 4th grade students, current 5th grade students, we do have a bit more data on them because it is our second year using STAR in those grades. So we have a sense of the profile of the students, although the unit assessment are different this year. We will continue to use the evidence of mastery process for students to identify students who qualify to skip or accelerate over a course. This is to ensure that students have an understanding of the most important content and skills from the course they would skip. One of the things that we try to avoid is creating gaps that may cause a student trouble either in the short term or down the road with the math courses that they're taking and the content that they're learning. Now, for grade 4 and 5 students to accelerate, we did change the criteria for a student to qualify to take the evidence of mastery assessment. What we're saying on here is a 97th percentile on the STAR assessment and 95% unit test average. We don't think this is going to disqualify any students who previously would have qualified for acceleration at those levels, but we do think it will reduce the number of students who are actually taking the evidence of mastery assessment. We had a number of students who would take the evidence mastery assessment each year who, realistically, would not have been good candidates to accelerate over an entire year of math. So we anticipate would reduce that number of students without changing the profile of the students who qualify for those higher level courses. For grades 6 to 7, so for a child who's currently in grade 6 math to qualify for grade 7 honors, we set the STAR requirement at the 88th percentile on 2 of their STAR tests, with an override available from a parent if they achieve at least 86th percentile on 2 of those assessments and have a 90% average on the unit assessments. In years past, it had been a 90th percentile on the NWEA map on one of those. A couple changes. It obviously is a different assessment. The STAR, in part because it's a shorter assessment, we're giving it to all students 3 times a year, where the map in previous years we'd given to students twice a year. So they will be taking the STAR assessment more times than they had taken the map in the past. For a child to go from 6th grade honors to qualify to take the evidence of mastery for seminar Algebra 1, they need, again, to be in the 97th percentile on 2 STAR assessments, 90% average on the unit assessments, and an 85% on the evidence of mastery. Starting the middle school, this is a little bit of a shift. In previous years, we had required a 90% on the evidence of mastery. In conversations with the teachers and taking a look at the data that we had available at that time, the group felt comfortable with 85% to qualify for acceleration on the evidence of mastery assessment. We did remove the criteria for a student to move from grade level 6th grade math to Algebra 1 seminar. In practice, in reality, there were no students who were making this move, and the team felt that it wasn't very appropriate for a student to jump not only on a level, going from grade level to either honors or seminar, but also accelerating over the content from Reveal Course 2 and Reveal Course 3. It was a lot of material for a child to be missing. And again, in reality, no students were making that jump anyway. So we didn't want to put it out there as a possibility that wasn't in practice, either something that in particular the math department felt was appropriate or one that was happening for students. For grade 7, for a child to go from grade 7 math to 8th grade honors Algebra 1, again, set the STAR requirement at the 88th percentile on 2 assessments, with the override available for students who have at least an 86th percentile and 90% average on the unit assessments. Again, they would still have to qualify based on the evidence of mastery assessment, testing the material that they would accelerate over with an 85%. This year, we started offering Algebra 1 honors in grade 9, and we will continue to offer that next year. So a student who may not qualify to take Algebra 1 honors this year still could take it in their freshman year at the high school. This is the placement criteria that we're going to use to make placement decisions for all students in a more formal way. But I wanted to mention that teachers, administrators continue to review assessment data and make instructional decisions for individual students as appropriate. It is possible that if for some reason it seems like we've gotten it wrong and we've gathered some new data, perhaps early in the new school year, that we could take a look at a child's individual math placement and decide whether it made sense for a change. Typically, if there's no new data to replace the data that we had in the spring of the previous year, we don't make math placement changes, but we do have those conversations about individual students and try to figure out the best way to meet those needs. I'd also say that we recognize that Reveal Math and the STAR assessment are relatively new for us. So we will continue to review that data about student performance in individual courses and decide, does this math placement criteria need further revision, particularly for the fall of 2025. So I'm happy to hear any comments or questions that the committee may have.
Anyone questions? I just make a comment that I know a lot of work goes into this, and it is, we have a very, my experience of rigorous math program, and that this is data driven. And so, I think in the past there has been, some frustration with parents. I've heard, and I'm going back years, but that, the criteria changes from year to year. But I think the point we need to make is it's based on data and feedback and seeing how we set our students to be successful in these programs. And so, and Dr. Kearney, what you said is that there are exceptions. We do take individuals, circumstances into place. So as long as we have that mechanism, but this is what, our professionals, our teachers in consultation, the data is showing us is the best way to ensure success in a given course level. So I just say thank you. I know this is a lot of work, and I know this is kind of a hot topic for a lot of parents. So a lot of work goes into the recommendations we make. So thank you.
No, thank you. And I think the team was definitely interested in taking a look at this and very interested in trying to get it as right as it can be.
And you're seeing in some cases you increase the requirement, and then in some grades you loosened it a little. So that's showing that you're really, looking at the data to drive the benchmark. So good work. Ms. Lau.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that any of the changes are primarily being driven by the fact that we migrated from using NWEA maps to STAR, and it seems like we were trying to find, like the most analogous cutoff point, right? Under the new assessment, using the new assessment tool. I think it just also bears reminding that, this applies just to elementary, or pre middle school and middle school only, and that once you get to the high school, there is a little bit more flexibility for parents. So, whether it's taking, certain math courses during the summer or, so I do want to just remind our parents that this does not lock you in. For those who are concerned about that, about the, requirements being too rigid, and that, when it comes down, time for high school, at least, there are ways where they, can kind of get their child where they feel like, they have the most chance to succeed.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about the high school. And just this year, right, correct me if I'm wrong, we also instituted an honors level algebra in ninth grade, which we did not have prior to that, which also, so if for any reason, your child is maturing at a different age and ready for elevation, acceleration at a later date, we used to not offer that in ninth grade, and as of this year we now had an honors option. So again, being very responsive to understanding people hit their growth spurts at different times, but that there are options in the high school and you have a little more personal control.
That's right. And I would add that the team did consider, were there other data points that we wanted to put in place as part of the placement criteria, and by and large they felt that the STAR as a benchmark assessment and the unit assessment data were good indicators of students' performance. There was some conversation, do we include PSSAs as a formal requirement? We have guidance on what sort of PSSAs might make sense, but it's not a formal requirement. Teacher input, is there other data that should be part of the formal process? And the team felt that those two data points help tell a good story. I think it's also important to mention that although they are kind of two different assessments, the STAR assessment and unit assessments, they aren't tests necessarily on one day. The STAR assessments administered at least 3 times a year. Unit assessments, we have multiple units as part of a course, so there's opportunities for students to do well over time. The evidence of mastery is either a 1 or a 2-day test, so that is a little bit more of a snapshot, but the criteria to qualify for honors level or for the evidence of mastery is data collected over time.
Ms. Curtin.
Ms. Curtin?
Thank you. Do we have a mechanism within the district that tracks the success rates of students once they're placed and pass the criteria? I'm kind of curious, if we were looking back, is that a gauge to help us see if these placement criteria really are effective? And I was just wondering if we track it as a district.
No, I think that's a very good question, and looking backwards is very helpful. What I would say is that by and large, they felt that the team felt that certainly the seminar level students are appropriately placed, and getting the feedback, they felt like it didn't miss those students who might be at the honors level, but seminar would be appropriate. I'd say where we pay closest attention to whether a child might be misplaced and is struggling is primarily at the middle school, and if they feel like they need to change and go down levels. And that's something the middle school engages in, in reviewing, in conversations with students and parents about periodically during the school year, usually, by the end of the first and certainly by the end of the second marking period, if there seems to be an indication. So they are paying the closest attention to whether a child might be misappropriately placed, particularly in too high a level math course. But then, as I said, we do from time to time have conversations about whether a child placement should be changed to a higher level math course based on what the teachers are saying, as well as sometimes from what parents are bringing to our attention.
So it's a little bit more fluid than just meet the criteria. Sometimes it can go up or down.
Yeah, I would say that the criteria is how the vast majority of the decisions are made. From time to time, we certainly will take a look at individual students if new data points have become apparent to us, or for some reason it seems like there was a mistake of one kind or another, usually because of extenuating circumstances. As I said, it's unlikely that we change a student's math placement if we don't have new data to suggest that the data we applied in the spring was incorrect. But if there would be some reason, for example, they're in the course themselves, we've given some more STAR assessments, and for some reason there's a huge jump. Their math teacher is telling us, based on the profile of them as a student, it might be worth considering. Those are conversations that definitely do happen. But by and large, most of the placement is being done based on the criteria that we just shared.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Okay, thank you. We can move on. We are out now at 4.05, approval and updates to the 2023-24 instructional calendar.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Dan Bechtold, assistant to the superintendent. I'm here to talk about Act 58 and the calendars, and so I'll ask Dr. Hand to go ahead and pull up the Act 58, Act 56 sheet for us. So in December of 2023, there was a change to the school code legislation allowed districts to choose either 180 days or 990 hours of instruction at the secondary or 900 at the elementary level. Previously, all school districts were held to, you had to have 180 days of instruction and you had to have 900 hours of instruction at the elementary level and 990 hours of instruction at the secondary level. This change provides flexibility to districts and falls in line with the majority of the states across the United States. Most states, I think there was less than 20 that had both a day and hour requirement. Pennsylvania was one of those, and we are moving towards the mainstream with permitting districts to make a choice here. This flexibility really gives us the opportunity to think creatively and outside of the box. It allows districts, Radnor's really been on the cutting edge when we change school start times. This provides districts flexibility when they're looking at possibly starting their high schools later, because counting minutes across school days is one of the key barriers to really making sure that you're able to get an 8:30 start. And so this provides flexibility for districts looking to do that. If you're a district that's considering either year-round school or there are some districts that have been really struggling to try to improve teacher recruitment and retention, looking at 4-day work weeks. This gives flexibility for that. So there's a host of things that districts can do. When we sat down internally and looked at the different options presented to us and thought about the flexibility, one of the things that came to our minds was related to snow days. And it's serendipitous that we're talking on a snow day that we've got. We've received a lot of feedback from elementary parents and students as to the struggles that young elementary students and their parents have on snow days when we do a virtual day. And so when we thought about this, one of the things that came to mind was we can bank the time with our teachers for professional development time and not have students make up those days or have them participate virtually. And that is because there's another law that's long-standing that's called Act 80. And Act 80 days permit districts to count teacher professional development days towards that 180-day student days. So we have, if you look at our school calendars, we have a variety of different purple triangles on the school calendars. Those are teacher professional development days. And those days count towards our 180-day requirement. So when you count up all the student days and you count up all the purple triangles, Radnor Township School District is well north of 180 days. Districts across the Commonwealth do the same thing. So this will, we believe, by allowing us to bank this time and use it with our teachers, it's really going to pay dividends. Number one, it's going to give them the opportunity to collaborate, work on curriculum, analyze student data. We just talked a lot about student data in the previous presentations, collaborate on major projects and initiatives that we've got, attend trainings. One of the things that we were talking about internally with the time that we've got now is we just did a significant homework study. And we've got the policy committee that is looking at the homework policy and AR. And when policies get passed, we really feel that it would be great if we had an opportunity for teachers for the ones that directly impact them in the classroom, if they had time to look at that and apply it to the practice. So one of the things that we're planning to do with this is to give teachers a set amount of time to work with their grade level peers or teachers that teach the same subject area or classes. Look at, once the policy committee finishes the policy and AR revisions, look at that, look at their practice, and make sure they're aligning themselves with the work that we did with the homework committee. So those type of things we think will pay big dividends. It'll also, by doing this, will allow us to have a finite date at the end of the school year. And that was one of the things that when we ran our homework committee last year, it was a really high priority for members of the committee, was really identifying and have a last day of school. So when you've got these built-in snow days that we may cut off, but if we extend, then we add to, it gets a little confusing for parents and students that are trying to make plans after the end of the school year. And so having a finite date, we think will benefit everyone. And lastly, flexible instructional days, while they're great, if we don't use them, arguably tacking on snow days at the end of the school year, well after AP exams, Keystone exams, PSSAs, those are less valuable instructional days than days that would happen earlier. So we think for all these reasons, we looked at our calendar and we're making the recommendation to the board that up to 2 or 3 days, if we would have snow days per year, that we would be able to turn those into teacher professional development days instead of having students Zoom in from home with the assistance of their parents. And so with that, I'll have Dr. Hand go to the 23-24 calendar. There is a minor change at the bottom. If we go to the bottom of this calendar, keep going, keep going. All right, so in the bottom center portion, the language has been amended in this bottom box that starts with the 23-24 calendar. It just explains that it was that the built-in days, because we had 2 weather emergency days that were in this calendar that we had planned to cut off if we did not use, that they were removed. And that explains very briefly what I just explained about the flexible instructional day, that we will turn these into in-service days for our teachers, and that the last day of school we are planning to have on June 12th. This will give certainty to families. It'll have the last day, half day on graduation day. That'll provide opportunities for everyone in our community that wants to attend graduation at Villanova to attend graduation. And so we think that this will be a win-win, and it'll provide us the opportunity to have certainty for the end of the school year. That is the only changes that we've got to this calendar. This was previously approved by the board, and so this would just be a revision that we would ask the board to approve. If we go to the next calendar, which is 24-25, and we go to the bottom of this calendar, nothing has changed in this calendar except for the removal of 2 built-in snow days and a very similar box explanation of the box at the bottom of this calendar. So nothing else has changed except for those 2 built-in snow days being removed and the box at the bottom explaining that. And then if we go to 25-26, this is a brand new calendar that has not come in front of the board. And I will just hit some of the highlights for the board here. So this calendar is very similar to the 23-24 and the 24-25 calendar, in that you can see that we've got the teachers coming back in the last week of August. So we do have a after Labor Day start for our students. If you can continue to scroll down there, Dr. Hand, thank you. We have no school for students that on religious holidays that fall during the school week. If you go to the very second page of this, Dr. Hand, keep going, keep going, keep going. One of the things that we've got in here is we have a number of religious holidays that that the district has identified that we have off. And so if you go back up, these are identified in the back of the calendar. These days are spread throughout. And so if they fall during the school week, whether that's Lunar New Year, Eid, Yom Kippur, etc., those days students don't have school, and those will either be teacher in service days or those will be district holidays. So that is the same. We have a full week of spring break that takes place in the end of March and beginning of April. So that is the same. And really the only substantive change outside of, if you go to the bottom where we've got June, outside of the no built-in snow days and the box at the bottom mirroring the other two calendars, the only change was we had in the 23-24 calendar and the 24-25 calendar, we had 4 days that were either 2-hour early dismissals or 2-hour delayed starts for teacher professional development. We had heard feedback from parents of the community about those days. We also looked at the calendar and ascertained how much time we had with the teachers, thought about the proposal that we're putting forward. And so we removed the 4 2-hour early dismissals or delays for professional development from this 25-26 calendar. So that is the only change, subsequent change that would be different from the other two. And I know I just threw a lot at you, so I am happy to answer questions.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Certainly.
Oh, can you hear me? So just to clarify, because we had a snow day today, then the last teacher day is the 13th, and that would be in service.
So one of the things that we will certainly do, Mrs. Peterson, is put out an email like we typically do to all employees saying, hey, this is where the calendar's at. And this is, when the last teacher day will be. Since we are amending the calendar, it would go out after the full board approves this calendar. And typically, I mean, we are still in February, so it is possible that that this calendar may be amended again if we have other snow days coming in. I don't anticipate that based on the proposal we've got. I think that we will be able to manage it with the 2 to 3 snow days and the FID days. But right now we're looking at, for the tentatively speaking, pending board approval, if we would have the 23-24 calendar approved by the board, the last student day would be Wednesday, June 12th. The last teacher day would be Thursday, June 13th.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I know that a lot of work went into getting the 2 that we currently have on the book. So there was a lot of meetings. So the fact that it's really following a lot of those decisions make this, I hope, a little simpler, right? That this year, because we've done a lot of the work. But I did just note quickly, and just a question, if we get any feedback in this one. So just to clarify, 25-26, I did note that we do have like 3 holidays at the end of May. And I'm just curious, because we would have an election day, which is a primary, which I know we had a lot of debate about, right? Whether we needed to be off on primary days. Traditionally we have, but there was the question, is there a workaround? Then we have Memorial Day, and then we have Eid. And it seems very condensed, those 3 days. And I'm just thinking, I think most of the APs are done by then, because usually it's the 3rd week. So maybe the 19th gets in that arena, and hopefully nationally they look at that. Don't we have 2 choices for AP exams usually, right? Don't we have 2 dates? But I just, whether there's any concern there from I know the teachers are under a lot of pressure at that point. Students are under, preparing for final exams. So is that any concern from an instruction standpoint for high stake testing that happens at the end?
APs would be over then. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Peterson. Yes, they're over the 17th.
Okay. So then
it does fall into Keystone exams. That's the only Keystone exams where we do them over 6 days. So I think we still would be fine.
Okay. That's just the note. I mean, it's really only 1 extra day, but I just know I always hear that teachers are kind of rushing towards the end to get the curriculum in for those final tests. So, and can you just reiterate what the process would be for approval, like when we want to take this to the full board for approval?
Certainly. So we would bring the 3 calendars forward to the full board for a vote in at the February school board business meeting. And if the board approves those, then we would update our calendar and put out information to the community so they're aware.
So I have a question, and I apologize if this has already been debated ad nauseum by previous iterations of the school board, but the comment about doing away with extra days at the end of the school year, and part of the reasoning is that AP exams and Keystones and PSSAs, they're all already done, and that kind of diminishes the value of days of the school year that are later on, right? I guess the flip side of that is that, days tacked on at the beginning of the school year are of more value for the very same reason, right? So have we debated that to death already, kind of starting school before Labor Day, or is that something that's still up for discussion?
So I'll jump in. I'll say
very hotly debated. Yes.
Yes, that happens to be one of the first things that comes up whenever we look at a calendar. And that has a before Labor Day start has been brought up, I think 3 times that we've had calendar committees since I've been here in 13 years. And we've had 1 or more board members that have said, hey, it makes a lot of sense. We have teachers that say, hey, it makes a lot of sense because PSSAs, Keystones, APs, and we feel that would buy us a whole nother week before we've got these high stakes tests. I think that the sentiment in a number of people in the community is that it's a Radnor and Delaware County tradition that a lot of people start after Labor Day. I will say that the tide has started to change, and there are, I believe when we did this presentation last year, at the curriculum committee, where we had the calendar committee's findings presented. I think there are 3 school districts that have bucked the trend and now are starting before Labor Day, and that the majority of the state starts before Labor Day. So I'll say that, we are always open to exploring things, but in our community, the last time we went through this, we heard from a number of people in the community that they would prefer that we started after Labor Day.
And you hit it right on the bullseye when saying that the discussion is really that the days early are more valuable, right? And then are we then at a disadvantage if we start later, but yet the end date for these tests are the same, right? Like we have to get to this certain point. And particularly in past years, we've had years where we've had, what year was it? I feel like it was 14 or 15 when we had snowstorms every week and, they were out. So, things that could happen. So, however, I thought we kind of landed on, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when Labor Day is early and we just happen to be looking at the next 3 years, that Labor Day happens to be early. But we really would, when Labor Day's later, and what was the date? It was like after the 5th, I think, that we would consider going before, because really that issue really became, I think, 2 years ago when we had a September 6th or 7th Labor Day, and then we had a Jewish holiday immediately after. So we weren't even starting till like the 8th. So I think that was kind of the general guideline. We said, as long as they're early, we can continue the Radnor tradition, but recognizing that if it falls later, that we may very well be recommending that we come prior to the holiday. And then we even talked about how potentially it might be nice if we had a slow start. You could then have maybe a 4-day Labor Day weekend so that people could still have time. So you'd get in, do all your logistical stuff, spend 3 days at the beginning, have a break, and then hit the ground. Then you'd have a 4-day and a 5-day. So there was even some value to maybe that you're kind of ramping up and, getting kids, endurance up. But we did talk about that.
And I will just jump in and say thank you, Ms. Duffy, for bringing up that. And I can actually share screen. So anybody that's interested, if you'd like to go back and watch the February 2023 curriculum committee meeting, we shared a document that I'll put up that actually spelled out when we would go before Labor Day. And so we are anticipating that we are in a good stead, but we went through and looked at like the school years and the start dates and identified when we would go and possibly. So there's a potential before Labor Day start based on the start of the school year for 26-27 and 27-28. So this is currently the 25-26 calendar. So we are having an after Labor Day start, but we will certainly be diving into this debate next year at this time while we are looking at the 26-27 calendar.
Wait,
Right.
that might even line up when we're entering a new Ithan elementary school. So you might need a little extra time to get the school ready.
Yeah,
Right?
well, thank
Isn't
you
that
for that background. It's very helpful. And, you know, maybe I'll save this suggestion for when we do take it up formally, but perhaps there could be a way to separate the high school, you know, from elementary and middle school, because I do think our high school students are the ones that we are most concerned about, right? In terms of putting them on equal footing with their peers at other schools when they're applying to colleges, you know, because they are the ones taking the high stakes tests and exams, right? So just something to consider.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we did pretty good on timing too. So we anticipate it might be a long meeting, and it's an hour and 17 minutes. So any new business? Okay. I will say one new business I have is just the Radnor Educational Foundation is having their annual fundraiser on Friday, February 23rd. Tickets are on sale now. I will say today was the day they went up from 150 to 200, but if you put in refer a friend, so I can be your friend, in your promo, you will get the 150 rate. So, but it is a lot of work goes into this. It is their primary fundraiser. And if you cannot attend, they also have a pretty fantastic raffle that they've put together so you can support the organization through the raffle. And I know there will be information on the Radnor Reader, in the Radnor Reader, and you can go to the Radnor Educational Foundation site for further information. Any public comment? I guess we don't. It's live only. So, and with that, if there's no objections, do we take motions for a meeting adjourned in committee meetings? No, right? No, great. Okay.